Hey guys, it's Fanged Pig Squeak Reads, and I'm with another review. Unfortunately, I don't have a physical copy of it because I was listening to it as an audiobook. So I decided to not read, but listen to the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix. So I've listened to almost all of his books. So I've listened to Horror Store, which I I recommend just for the weird jingle advertisements that happen in each chapter. I definitely recommend that you check it out as an audiobook. It is hilarious. Both hilarious and then gets increasingly more ominous and freaky and creepy as the story moves along. But that's for a whole other review. So I've read Horror Store. I've also read My Best Friend's Exorcism. I just finished this one, and I really can't wait to start listening once this out as an audiobook. The Final Girls Support Group, I think it's called. I think it was just released like up on NetGalley. Unfortunately, I don't have access to that, but that's fine. So I decided to, review this book, even though it's not an indie book, because I have thoughts. It might not be, well, it might turn into a rant a little bit later on, because this book, guys, it's good. I mean, I really like this book. I mean, I'm a vampire author, so anything concerning vampires, I will just jump onto it immediately. And I will read it. And what I really liked about Grady's take on vampires is that he kind of connects it to serial killers. I mean, yeah, it makes sense. It makes definite sense that he would compare them to serial killers. I mean, they are usually prowling the night. They pick their victims, and they kill them. I mean, you can definitely see that, connecting with vampires. They usually do the same thing. So, what I found really interesting about this is that he decided to he set it in the 1990s, and of course in Charleston in North Carolina. I mean, I think that's where he's from, so he has the best connection to it. And it's funny because I had just finished, before Christmas vacation, I had finished reading or listening to My Best Friend's Exorcism, and that happened in Charleston as well. So I was all familiarized with that kind of setting, especially, and I found it was really funny because there are two characters in both books named Marjorie, and a thought crossed my mind. I'm like, same character maybe, a little bit older maybe. Could be. Not sure. I have to ask Grady about it on Twitter if I get the chance, but might be. So fun little connection to that. Maybe Charleston's like cursed or something. I don't know. Anyhow, so it's set in the 1990s, and it revolves around these group of housewives. They have their own book club, and at first they were just reading this kind of boring stories that they didn't really want to read. So they take a different approach, and they decide to read like books about serial killers and true crime, and get really immersed in it, which is something that I would definitely participate in. I mean, true crime and serial killers, that's my jam. And then suddenly there's this new neighbor that comes in, this new person that comes into their neighborhood. It's a man, and he's kind of like enigmatic. You don't really know that much about him. And then as soon as he moves into the neighborhood, like these weird things start to happen. Like one woman, like an elderly woman, she attacks the main character, actually the protagonist, and bites a part of her ear. That was horrible. And then like the protagonist has like an elderly mother-in-law who's living with them, and she she's kind of has like I think dementia. That's not really right in the head, unfortunately, due to her age. And she, when they meet this new person, like they invite him over for dinner or something like that. She has this kind of like, feel like I've known you, I've seen you before, and it like progresses further on. She like calls him another name, and exclaims that she has a photograph of him, and you immediately of course start to suspect like, yeah, I mean that guy's a vampire, what he's gonna do. And I'm not gonna go like in depth into the plot of the story, but basically it kind of happens like the protagonist, after witnessing two horrible events, the person attacking her, biting her ear, and another thing that's like happened within her family, she starts to suspect that this new person, James Harris, is not who he seems to be. And so she starts, going over all the vampire books and serial killers and stuff, and she comes to the conclusion that like, yeah, he's a vampire, but she doesn't know how to go around it. I mean, if you would go up to a person and be like, hey, I think that guy's a vampire, not a lot of people would believe you. So she gathers her book club and try to convince them that he's like a drug dealer. He's dealing drugs to kids, because it's at that time when in the States that they were issuing the war on drugs. So everything related to drugs and children was this hysteric panic among a lot of families at that time. And they were almost on board and were gonna do something about it, but they are intercepted by their husbands. Yeah. So they decided to, befriend the new stranger, and he suddenly become their business partner, and they're like, you girls are crazy, he's fine. And why would you humiliate a man like that? And, they take his side and not their wife's side. And, oh, this is where the rant comes, I think. This got me so angry. Maybe it has to do with the fact that, I'm raised in Iceland. And here in Iceland, we have a much higher gender equality than most other countries. I mean, I'm not saying that it's completely perfect. It's not. But, at that time, and during the 1990s, my mom, for example, she was working. She had been working, I think, since 11 years old. She was dealing with 3 kids, but still she was working alongside with my dad. And my dad, he participated in raising us here in Charleston in the 1990s. It's the 1990s. I can understand that it was happening in the 1970s or 60s, but 1990s. The husbands are not participating in raising their children. They don't give a crap about the children, and they give less crap about their wives. So it got me so fucking angry that they would side with a total stranger and not their wives. And yeah, if I'd had a physical book, I probably would have thrown it across the room and then picked it back up because I would continue reading it. But yeah, that sucked. And but I kept reading it, or I kept listening to it, and then we skip 3 years afterwards, and like the guys are still friends with James Harris, and the protagonist Patricia, she kind of has moved on. Just tried not to let it like fester in her head, and trying to reason with herself that that James Harris being there has been beneficial for their families and stuff like that, crap like that. and then it's not. Then they suddenly see that he's moving on to their children, like James Harris wants their children, and that's when they decided to take it upon themselves to kill him. So it was interesting. There were a lot of scenes that really creeped me out. Like, there's one scene that involves rats, and technically I don't find rats repulsive. Like, if I see one or two, I'm like, oh, they're cute. But especially because I live in Iceland, we don't have that much of a rat problem. Like, maybe downtown Reykjavik, but here, what I guess would call the suburbs, not so much. I mean, I haven't seen anyone. So there is a scene with rats, like, where they are like swarming to people, and just the descriptions of like how they were climbing up people's the legs and trying to gnaw at the belly button. I'm like, nope, nope, no, that's so creepy. And there's this other scene, and I just my like I shuddered the entire time, and it felt even worse listening to it, guys, than reading it on the book. So there's a scene when Patricia is, she's doing her investigation, and she wants to find evidence that, James Harris is not who he seems to be. And she breaks into his house and finds some evidence in his attic. But then he shows up in the house, and she panics and she can't go anywhere, so she stays upstairs in the attic. I mean, for me that sounds okay, but this attic is filled with like cockroach spray, like mold, so many mice and insects. My head just feels itchy just thinking about it again. So she hides under this like really old blankets that is like crawling with insects. And just that scene when she's just, underneath it all, trying not to make a sound, even as these critters are crawling all over her. And there's this one scene where one cockroach is burrowing into her ear, and I just know that was such a hard scene to listen to. And it just, even today, this is one of my fears, and I hate this, especially as mention again, we don't have that much insects here in Iceland, so this is one of my nightmares. I was vividly again thrown into when I was watching Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, and the scene where I think the character's name was Willie, is walking in this cavern, and there are insects everywhere, and they're crawling all over her. And I don't mind the heart grabbing stuff in Indiana Jones. That I just laughed at that. But that scene freaked me out, and that scene in Grady Hendrix' book freaked me out. I even told some of my coworkers that scene, and they were like, "Nope, not reading that." So if you are squeamish about this kind of thing, just beware. That's just It was so good though. I mean, if a scene makes you squeamish and you like it, that is top notch. But yeah, it was really great. What I'm saying is, I really enjoyed this book, and it was really good. And I really loved how he made James Harris as like a villain. You don't really see him as like a traditional vampire. He put his own spin to it. It's like he looks normal. He's just he can't go out into the light. It's just the sunlight hurts his eyes or something. It doesn't burn or anything like that. but he has to. He still holds on to the the classics and the traditions of vampire lore, especially when James Harris has to be invited into the house, and after he's been invited one time, he can come whenever he pleases, and that is really evident in the third act of the book, and that was just fucked up as hell, just really fucked up. And when in the finale, like the penultimate finale, he still had this kind of arrogance, even though the girls, they beat him, he still had that arrogance, what I usually typically associate with what serial killers would have. I mean, they, as I said, they beat him, and he's like, I'm a medical marvel. Why are you doing this? I'd be doing you guys a favor. And you're like, fuck you, no. So I'm happy when, even though he was still trying to put this charm on them, the girls were like, nope, not gonna work. Chop chop. And so yeah, I really, really like that. What I really didn't like though was in the finale, the main protagonist Patricia, she didn't really participate that much in that. I would have loved to see her, be an essential part of what they were doing. It was mostly the other girls of the book club, and she had a part in it, which I guess was important, but I would have loved it if she had been able to, rise from what she was dealing with, and just, bash his brains in or something like that. I mean, he had almost torn her family apart. So I would imagine, there would be some rage in it. But no, not really. So based on this, you can definitely decipher that, there were two villains in this story, James Harris, and in my case, the husbands. They were assholes. And I'm glad that in the epilogue, or like the epilogue part, like where they were resolving everything, that they got their comeuppance as well. And I was especially Patricia's husband. He got what he deserved. Asshole. Such an asshole. But yeah. But the ending was bittersweet. So yeah, and I enjoy that because, you have to kind of have these kind of endings where they are dealing with what happened. You can't really have a happy ending when, in horror. Not that much. It kind of has to be bittersweet or bleak, in my opinion at least. So I'm happy that Grady managed to do it like that. So I definitely recommend this book. I mean, judging from my rant, kind of a rant review maybe, I don't know. But even despite in spite of that, I really, really liked it. And I definitely recommend that you check it out, especially if you want to see like the whole his different take on vampires, even though there was just this one vampire. I usually always expect more, but his justification, of connecting to a serial killer makes complete sense to me anyway, so that's fine. So, yeah, despite my anger at this, at the the husbands and how they, or the lack of how they treated their kids and stuff, this was definitely a 5-star book for me. I mean, I really enjoyed it, and I also loved the narration. The voice actor who was, narrating the stories, she did a fantastic job. Can't remember what her name is. I'm sorry. Probably add it in the description afterwards. And if you haven't read any of Grady Hendrix's books, I definitely recommend them. He is becoming a really good horror writer. Then I'm definitely gonna continue to read books after him. So this was great. I would think, yeah, 5 stars, definitely. So I hope you enjoyed this review, and I'll see you next time.